I checked with my wife, and she told me I couldn't get the implant. So the Humane Ai Pin is probably the closest to the future I can get to right now. I mean, just, yeah. So if you're an early adopter or an innovator, this video is for you. So I encourage you to keep watching. If you're not, please continue your internet browsing. I won't be offended. So the video today itself, we're going to really take a deep dive into the Humane Ai Pin, right? This has been a product that has garnered quite a bit of attention. And, you know, I kind of want to start with kind of my own experience working with Humane. I guess not working with them, but from the customer side and my interactions and my overall experience with the company. I'm not a traditional tech reviewer, and I think if you're watching this review right now, if you're looking for a tech review like a traditional one, this isn't the video for you. This video is for early adopters who can really want to kind of dig a little deeper into the technology and where it stands from a big picture perspective. So we're not going to do any unboxing. We're not going to talk about, like, harp on the shortcomings or whatnot of the AI Pin, because truthfully, you have plenty of options right now on YouTube to go check out those videos. But I can tell you one thing to save you an immense amount of time is that most things that you do watch or read online right now about the Humane Ai Pin is that they're effectively saying the same thing, like, for real. They're saying the same exact thing. Watch one video from a tech reviewer, whoever that could be, and you will effectively get the point in their sentiment. But the purpose of this video is to really increase the visibility from an early adopter's perspective. And we'll kind of dive into what that is, because specifically I'm going to talk about the technology adoption curve, list some examples of technology development and how they reach specific markets. And I'm kind of going to give you kind of like a mechanical engineering perspective, which will also be highlighted with a business owner's perspective, and overall share with you my experience with the product. So my introduction with the Humane Ai Pin. So in September of 2022, Casey Neistat, kind of like a notable YouTuber, tweeted that his friend Sam Sheffer was taking position at Humane. And being an avid Casey fan, I mean, pretty much if he posts something to check something out, I'm gonna check it out. So I immediately looked into the company of who is Humane, and I soon really understood their vision. I mean, I remember going to their website, and they had like this production kind of commercial or video, just really communicating what their vision of the future looks like as it relates to technology. And I just remember seeing like this very cinematic trailer of people or like an individual looking at the sky, and they're kind of like awing at a solar eclipse. And this imagery kind of painted this future, right? This imaginary future. Because on one hand, it was kind of dark. I mean, like, how is this world going to be in the next 10 years when we keep including technology in our lives? It was kind of like very bleak in some ways, but on the other hand, it was illustrating kind of like the possibilities of the future, where, you know, could we be a little bit less reluctant on technologies and be more present in the meantime. So I thought that was a really interesting approach they did on their marketing back in 2022. But overall, the future was dark. I mean, I think that was kind of like the essence of the video, that the future did seem kind of dark. But I think my takeaway was that collectively, humanity, if we can, share, or if we can aim for like a brighter type of future, we'll at least feel less alone. And we can at least feel like we're not alone on this conquest to whatever version of the imminent future may look like. But yeah, fast forward a little bit. I mean, I soon subscribed to their newsletter and signed up to their email in 2022 and followed them pretty closely. When Imran, one of the co-founders and the inventor on several of their patents, he did a TED Talk. I think it was probably in 2023 or maybe late 2022, where he kind of doubled down on his vision of the future. And this was during the time where the Oculus and just all these other VR headsets were getting a lot of attention. And it really reminded me that, well, if anything, it resonated with me that Emron's future was, screens are not going to be in front of your face. It's going to be a screenless future. And Elon Musk has also referenced this too when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast as well, where he says he shares a similar sentiment too, where it's like he doesn't believe, or at least his expression was like, the future is not going to be in front of your face, especially like a couple inches away from your eyes. And someone like in my position where I went to school for engineering, worked as an engineer, and now kind of do my own thing as far as marketing, I spend a lot of time in front of the computer. I spend a lot of time on screens and so forth like that. And I get a lot, like great fatigue, and sometimes I feel like I'm not present, truthfully, in the moments I share with my friends, or it's either in business or family and stuff like that. And that's a future that I would want too, is that a screenless future, something that I can just be a little bit more present with. So as you can tell up to this point, Humane's vision is quite frankly clear, and it's something that I think can really, assemble that audience that wants a similar future. Now, despite Elon Musk sharing a similar vision of a kind of a future where screens are not in front of your face, we all know that he's already making headwinds with his technology company, Neuralink, one of his many technology companies. And Neuralink is effectively an implantable medical device that goes into your skull. They've already had a kind of an example or a demonstration of a human having that technology. I don't know what the diagnosis or the challenges that this person's having, but they're effectively on a wheelchair and they don't have much, if any, motor function. And there's a video floating online of them playing chess on their laptop by just sitting there and just thinking it and moving the chess pieces with the implant. That's just remarkable, right? Think about the population that you can help, especially those that don't have those motor skills for whatever reason. But truthfully, I checked with my wife and she told me I couldn't get the implant. So the Humane Ai Pin is probably the closest to the future I can get to right now. Anyway, the next section I really want to talk about is the technology adoption curve. So a mentor of mine years ago suggested and introduced me to this book called Crossing the Chasm by Geoffrey Moore. And I remember the candid moment because he also suggested reading Humble Inquiry by Edgar Sheen. And anyway, this book, Crossing the Chasm, it outlines the technology adoption curve. And I believe it is so pertinent to how consumers will perceive and maybe someday adopt technology like the Humane Ai Pin. The technology adoption curve is effectively a bell curve that segments the market by consumer behaviors. On one side of the screen, you have the early market, and it's comprised of technology enthusiasts. So you have your innovators and you have your early adopters. And then you have this chasm, also known as the valley of death. And then you have your mainstream market, which has the early majority, late majority, and then laggards. So to be 100% clear, it is very evident to me that tech reviewers nowadays, especially on YouTube and other platforms, they're kind of uncertain to who they're speaking to. And now let me clarify. Specifically, the wide criticism that we're receiving right now from the Humane Ai Pin has been from laggards, aka the skeptics. Now, that doesn't mean that these people, the laggards, their perceptions are wrong. And I think to better illustrate that is a good example from a person I interviewed years ago. His name's Mark F. Erickson. and he is also a photographer. He told me that when it comes to photography, you have three subjects. You have the photographer that's taking the photo, you have the subject in the photo, and then you also have the audience, people that see the photo, right? And these three participants of just one photograph have their own unique experience with it, and it's all part of the same overarching story. But back to the adoption curve. It is clear to me on several points that Humane as a company, the inventors, the team, and the investors, they're the innovators, right? So let's just get that out of the way. They're the innovators. They created a vision that is so compelling and was able to back it financially to bring their idea into the market, into a real life product. And, only one can imagine such a feat, right? I mean, don't get me started on just the challenges of manufacturing nowadays. And quite frankly, I will talk about that later, more on that later. But the early adopters, on the other hand, represent the visionaries. The market are the advocates. This market, the early adopters, they're the advocates, whether they're the first ones to purchase the product or they're an extension of Humane's team and network. And as it relates to my participation out of all of this Humane AI Pin stuff is I am an early adopter of the Humane AI Pin, period. Now, the great challenge that every new technology needs to consider is the chasm. Steve Blank and others may refer to this as the valley of death, but it's heavily referenced when evaluating new ideas. But from my experience, it's usually the crazy that think that they can cross such a gap. Perhaps this is a really bad example, but someone like Elizabeth Holmes says something like, first they criticize you for being crazy, then the next day you change the world. I mean, despite all of her stuff that went on with her and her company Theranos, well, she was definitely a participant of change, but it probably wasn't the change that she was looking for. So let's take that with a grain of salt. But a great example in the book, Crossing the Chasm, is that it illustrates the notorious Segway. Now, when you think of the Segway, you may associate it to the mall cop, right? Who's gliding through vacant, probably mall walkways and probably having a blast doing it. He's probably having the time of his life. But the Segway, it actually does have some pretty cool technology. I mean, think of it like a gyroscope that was able to distribute the human's weight, and the overall product profile is super ergonomic and can maneuver through high school kids at the mall. Really, I think the technology itself is actually very fascinating and it's actually quite innovative. But the Segway definitely has its challenges. And for those that adopted the Segway, that market, those early adopters, they probably shared the same vision that the inventors did, right? Of using that technology in certain use cases. Perhaps on a bike trail, or maybe they had a vision of using the Segway in like the metro areas on city streets, in highly dense metros. You can get to your meetings or get to point A to point B in just a really quicker fashion. But here was the killer of the Segway. The killer that prevented the technology from crossing the chasm into the early majority mainstream market. Stairs. Yes, stairs. Now, just think about it. For that technology to be truly adopted into the mainstream market, meaning that everyone would adopt the Segway eventually in their life, how the hell is it going to maneuver stairs? Like, stairs are regulated and designed by municipal city planning, building codes. Think about all the regulations that you would have to navigate. But I mean, if that's hard to comprehend, just think about all the stairs you see in your everyday life. There's no way in hell stairs are going to change. And just consider the construction costs for every single building to replace stairs with a ramp or something. For every single building, for every public use space, if you see a stair, that's a challenge for the Segway. But here's another example. Tesla, electric vehicles, okay, EVs. One could say that electric vehicles have already crossed the chasm, that the infrastructure network is continuously expanding and et cetera. The technology's there, production's there, and then you see other companies like a Ford or other, well-known car manufacturers are now rolling out their own electric vehicles. But I can assure you that you will find someone in rural America that will still be laggards and are still skeptics to adopting electric vehicles. They like their gas-powered vehicles for reasonable reasons, right? And considering their terrain and their lifestyle. So going back to Humane, the current state of the tech reviewer, especially those with a large influence, they're speaking to a large mainstream audience. Like, times have changed, right? Like maybe 10 years ago, or maybe probably that 5 years ago, these tech reviewers were probably like the indie type crowd, right? Or they're like the indie content creators. They were speaking a voice that was against the grain. But truthfully, your favorite indie creator, like they are now more and more like they are now mainstream. Like Google and YouTube, these are platforms that have gotten so much adoption primarily because of its creators. And these indie tech reviewers are now serving a mainstream audience. It's 2024. YouTube is now mainstream. Being a YouTuber is now like a mainstream thing to do because you're speaking to a mainstream audience predominantly. And I think that's what is missing from the public narrative, is that there should be more voices, or there's a lack of voices from the innovators and early adopters. And there may be many reasons why these voices clash with the mainstream audience, if you refer back to the technology adoption curve. So firstly, visionaries and early adopters, they speak about the future. Okay, the early majority market or the early mainstream market, they speak about the future. The vision is intrinsic to them, and therefore their contributions online, how they post things online, text or video, whatever content it is, it often is contrast with the mainstream market, because the mainstream market cares about the present. Like, how is this going to impact my life today? And secondly, the early adopters like myself, we're spending our times enjoying these new technologies rather than commenting and contributing online. Hell, I mean, I'm making this video right now, and this is a huge step outside my comfort zone because I don't really do this. But truthfully, I've made the intentional decision to contribute more and consume less. That's kind of like a personal decision of mine. So coming to the next part is to really understand the Humane Ai Pin from a mechanical engineering perspective. Now, full disclosure, I don't know anything about software, and I try my utmost to not act like I do. So as a result, the AI Pin, which is massively a software-driven product in many cases, is safe with me. I have some feedback on some of the bugs, but honestly, take the feedback from people with more experience in that domain. Don't take it from me. On the hardware side, first impressions is just wow. I mean, what an incredible feat to manufacture a hardware product in 2024. I don't think people understand just how difficult it is to manufacture hardware. And Elon Musk also said something like this on one of his podcasts, was like, he says, right now, like, it's just not communicated to the mainstream media. For example, Hollywood, like there's not like a film out there or a way to communicate the challenges of manufacturing, like the story of a manufacturer. And when we think about tech startups, we usually just think about like a Facebook or all these SaaS businesses. We think about these tech bros and they're like their zip up hoodies behind their Macs and whatnot. And, quite frankly, I kind of fall into that perception oftentimes too. But when it comes to manufacturing, I mean, it's just not the same persona of the human that we think at a tech startup. Like, you can't just make a hardware product with a laptop and an internet connection. You can't. There's people intrinsically involved in the process. When we talk about materials, the manufacturing process, the quality, like there's just so many examples of that. I mean, so now let's kind of dig a little deeper. So, I mean, for the enclosure, that is the enclosure of the AI pin is effectively the same size of like the camera module on the back of an iPhone 15. I mean, that is just incredible. There's a built-in laser projector with sensors and multiple lenses. It's like, damn. Aluminum body with a magnetic battery, a touchpad that sensors one or two fingers and gestures. I mean, it just kind of boggles my mind how the hell they were able to do this, quite frankly. And the weight is quite distinct. It does matter what shirt you're wearing. I mean, this device is definitely the best fit on sweaters or jackets or like long sleeves, like how I have it right here. But I just hate wearing it on t-shirts because t-shirts, it just drags the collar down. And I just hate that look. So, you know, this device does introduce, though, however, a new category of textiles or a whole new category of just like upper wear. And I think that's interesting in itself. I mean, going back to Imran's tech demo, he was wearing like this kind of zip up blazer, and I couldn't even tell that he had the pin because I think what he was wearing a shirt or a jacket where it had like a little pocket where like the 3/4 of the pin would be sitting in that pocket, and the only exposed part was the camera and the light sensor area. So I mean, if like we can come up like a new category of shirts and stuff like that, or upperwear that has those little pockets, and especially for me, like black with my matte black Eclipse pin, I mean, that'd just be so sick. But the dimensions are, overall the hardware dimensions is like, I just don't really see how I can get smaller, like overall dimensions wise. So again, if we can find like pocket tees and stuff like that, or just other form factors for shirts, I mean, that would be sick. But the design itself, the design of the pin itself is just impeccable. I mean, the accessories, the pins, even to the charger, everything of the entire system, you can just tell like the design perspective was just so like intentional, and they just put so much time and effort into thinking about all the fine details, and I can just appreciate that so much. In engineering fashion, here I'll get a little more critical, is that, you know, if you are a mechanical engineer, or you know someone that's an engineer at like a corporate company, improvements are made, but they're incredibly incremental. So there are opportunities to improve the hardware. So factors such as weight and thermal conductivity are probably major areas of innovation. I mean, to address these, you would probably maybe consider alternative materials. Right now, the chassis itself is made out of like an aluminum, but I'd be curious to see them explore other materials like a titanium, considering, you know, it has this different traits with heat conductivity and as it compares to aluminum. But costs will also be a big factor of all of this. So really, I can see Humane launching new products in the future where maybe they do have a more like an economy version that's maybe made out of like a very, I don't know, like an extremely durable plastic, and they have their aluminum model, and then they have like a different model with like more premium materials. So it's effectively following the Apple product model, having those 3 tiers effectively. But other materials like steel, stainless steel, polymers, I guess they could probably be ruled out right now. Maybe polymers could still be kind of explored. I mean, if Humane was very adventurous, they could explore making their own polymer of like a certain blend, or license an existing material technology patent. Exotic materials like nitinol probably wouldn't be the best case in this situation, because that's nitinol. It has certain distinct features based on temperature. You know, kind of is way more malleable, but who knows, maybe there is an application there somewhere. The materials would definitely contribute to the overall thermal weight features of the device. Another option is to maybe kind of look at all the materials of the hardware itself and see how much you want to include glass, right? Additional glass into the materials, like a type of hardened glass or something. That could also be considered as well. The machining of the device is just incredibly precise. Other ways that will contribute to the thermal and the weight will be optimizing the internal hardware components. Perhaps a different lens. Instead of having multiple lenses, could you reduce it and have one lens, or fewer lens? The battery and the camera are also opportunities to optimize. It would be neat to see what type of testing the hardware has gone through. And this is really just self-serving. I mean, this is just for myself. And I'm sure they already do this. They just don't like release it as marketing because maybe a lot of people don't care about it. But for an early adopter, I actually would kind of care, just to kind of understand how they made this thing. So examples would be doing cycle tests. So these tests are often like under thousands, if not millions of cycles. Under controlled constraints, and it's really the purpose of these tests is to understand its failure modes. So examples of testing could be like, well, how many drops can this device withstand? At what distance can the enclosure handle? How many touches on the trackpad can be done before it fails or something fails within it? How many times does detaching and attaching the magnet from the back of the device and so forth like that before it fails? How many times does the charge pad setting that, like anytime the device interacts with a mechanism, like those are opportunities to test those things. Just really understand how many times can you do this repetitively under cycles until it fails. So also, I'm sure they've done this as well, but some finite element analysis would be very interesting to verify revised designs or new designs. And then you would validate it through benchtop testing. So I don't know if Humane reference ASTM standards, but you would at least try to find some ASTM standards that are relevant, and you can use those as your kind of your model for testing on benchtop. But I mean, since this is kind of like a newer category, perhaps Humane can also be further a leader in their space to even, I don't know, ASTM can make their own standard that's unique to this type of category. That would be even talk about, just talk about making more of an impression, right, into the whole market and technology in itself. So these tests also go beyond the enclosure and complete systems. Having these tests for the internal components will also be very meaningful. It's unlikely that the Humane Ai Pin comes with a list of replaceable repair parts, but if there is an opportunity for them to enter in new markets and get different types of accounts, like corporate accounts, maybe having a service model and having refurbished models could have some application. Those are just some things in kind of like a traditional hardware product life cycle and kind of the areas that the product or the business can really highlight. So now the next piece here is business from a startup owner perspective. So the funding side is quite interesting. Despite this notion, there's this like kind of general notion online that startups are veiled as these privileged people that have a fat checkbook that investors give them. Partially I can see some truth in that, but I think it's actually, there's way more pieces to that story. We must recognize and just get that out of our heads is that developing a hardware product takes a significant amount of capital as compared to software companies. I have yet to really find an article or find something that kind of speaks against that, but if you're developing a hardware company, especially a hardware company that has software components, it's going to take way more capital to commercialize. And most times it takes a lot more time to bring it to life. So I think of, anything that Humane actually raised as far as the capital side will be a significant benchmark for other hard tech companies and investors in the future. So if you're a tech startup right now, or you're a founder, you should really pay attention to how Humane funded their company and who those investments came from, because that's really going to set the precedence or set the tone, the benchmark. But it's really unclear of what their burn rate is for a company and their current funding and gross revenue and stuff like that. I mean, right now in one of their podcasts with How I Built This or something, with Guy Ross, I think is his name, they did say that they did fund the company themselves. So they seeded the company with their own money, which you got to respect that as well, right? They're putting their own money, not only their time and life into it, but they're putting their own money into it as well. But what's unclear from the revenue perspective is, I believe that not only are they capturing revenue from selling the device itself and their monthly subscription, their agreements with Tidal and some of the services that they have selected to be as part of like the back end of things, I'm sure there's probably some revenue or gross revenue or some fee associated with that. Additionally, their licensing strategy is really interesting because right now the Humane Ai Pin is only available in the US market, but there have already been some, news directly from Humane that they're expanding into other markets through a licensing model. So those licensing models, more than likely, probably for certain, have a royalty fee attached to it. They probably have some success fees attached to it. So I'd be curious, really, I just really want to know what their investor pitch deck looks like. Man, that would be freaking awesome to see that. And how like the early stage investor decks look like when they were trying to raise funds. Man, that would be like just great content I wish I could see right now. Patenting. So patenting is interesting. So Elon Musk and his companies such as Tesla and SpaceX, he has really been leading this charge of having an open patent policy. It's a very bold move, but arguably the most influential innovator in technology, Elon Musk, he's taking that step. So should Humane lead with innovation and kind of be up at his speed, or maybe they don't want to be, maybe they actually despise the guy, they should maybe consider their patent portfolio. I mean, according to Musk, patents are effectively legal landmines, and he says it himself that they stifle innovation, right? Like you design something and then you're just fear that your competitor or someone out there in their basement is going to steal your idea and like make millions off of it. Humane's vision is so compelling and is so strong. And if that's the vision they really believe in, why not? Why not open up your patents for the entire market, for the entire world? If that's the future that you want to live in, you should probably consider that it takes everyone, it takes a whole entire industry to adopt that model of a screenless future and just try to understand like, hey, it takes more than just one company to really make this impact for all of us to live in. But for a business with a patent portfolio, it'd be interesting to see how they carry on this culture of inventorship, the spirit of inventorship internally. Some corporate organizations often have like an innovation business units, or they have kind of these business units that encourage their team and enable their team to develop new ideas. So at an organization, someone in your organization comes up with a new technology or something, they can disclose it within the organization. That organization will then file the patents, the provisionals and so forth like that, and then the inventor can get a cut, but also the patent will be owned by the organization. So organizations that would then file and so forth like that. So all the patents expenses, or majority, or some of the patent expenses would be covered by the inventor in the organization, and then it'd be licensed out to another company to develop it further. But as of right now, Humane's patent portfolio, I just did a really quick search and they have quite a bit. I think they have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. They have 22 patents right now, according to Google. And some of the patents itself is probably internal designs or methods of how the AI pin actually works. But there was some other patents on here that I feel like has not been granted yet. For example, systems and apparatus for fertility and hormonal cycle awareness. That is so interesting. So let's say if that technology is granted, is that going to be a completely new device by Humane, or is that going to be something like an over-the-air software update? I don't know. I just really don't know. But that's just kind of telling of where their future is like where their vision's heading as far as how does technology interact with a human. So those are just some really interesting things that I found when I did a really quick patent search. Licensing. So as mentioned before, with these patents, it's clear to me that the strategy is to license technology into new markets so that they can expand. So far, they've made several major announcements, but it's very unclear that these licenses are exclusive. Typically, license agreements will have certain milestones and success fees built into the terms. And if it's an exclusive license, that really forbids others to have access to the patent and have access to the intellectual property to develop it. So it's kind of unclear like how they measure what's exclusive and what's not as far as licensing goes. Now, marketing. Holy crap. Marketing. I could probably talk for hours on their marketing. I mean, from their short films to their TEDx talk to their fashion show collaboration. Those are just so many interesting things that they've done that's been very intentional on their marketing side. The fashion show was just so interesting. And it's interesting because you don't often see technology companies collaborate with like a fashion show, having your runway models wear your technology. But I think that was such a genius idea because I think they're trying to illustrate what this future looks like, how people can include technology on their bodies, right? And I guess with that, I watched one of their videos at the fashion show and I learned about UR Tracks, which is a phenomenal DJ. So I even got more value just watching a fashion show, which I don't do often, but I probably should because I could probably take some tips perhaps. The supply chains and operations. So during the priority release, statements were disclosed that not all components were sourced from the singular supplier. So they made communications that not all of their components were sourced from a single supplier. So that could be the entire system itself. It could be a charger from this vendor, the cable from this vendor, the case from this vendor, and so forth like that. But you know, there are reasons why companies do this. But it was definitely a bummer because I think it kind of bit them in the ass a little bit. But my question is, why wasn't inventory just ordered and just sitting on a shelf ready to go, right? So if you are promoting that there's gonna be priority orders, and you know who placed the pre-order, you at least have an idea of how many units or systems you would need. And then if you're gonna set a date and when it was going to deliver, I just thought that was just so interesting how they cared about that. Like I would think that they were trying, I don't know what they were trying to do. Honestly, I think because the solar eclipse happened around that time, around like mid-April, I think they were just trying to line everything up with the solar eclipse. But even then, it's like, how come the orders weren't placed beforehand? Like the planning of the whole supply chain felt like, yeah, I think it could have been done a little differently. Because in my head, I mean, just order everything, have it in-house, have it sit there for a month or not, take the inventory costs, eat it, but at least you can deliver when you say you're going to deliver, right? Or if you need to set it up to a certain timeline for the eclipse or something, then do it. You have time to plan ahead. So I thought that was really interesting. Why just not order everything and ship it out and deliver when you said you would? Now, on the regulatory side, this device is not a medical device by any means, which therefore mitigates a lot of challenges from navigating the FDA, for example. But should Humane enter the space of biometrics and bioinformatics, they will likely have to apply and to get regulatory approval from the FDA. But for the looks of it, it would probably be a class 1 exempt, maybe. But I don't know, it's probably unlikely it's a class 2, but you just never know. So a pre-submission with the FDA would probably be the most useful thing they could do right now if they want to get into this space of the technology interacting with a human, even on a more intimate level. However, the device is regulated by the FCC. So when it comes to the product launch, I'm thinking of all the accessories in the exclusive gear now. Now I'm putting my business hat on, where I'm sitting, and I'm just seeing so many opportunities. I'm seeing dollar signs. Like, just think of companies out there that make specific hardware accessories for like Mac only. Like, you only go to that company to buy a Mac laptop case or a Mac charger or something like that. Like, that just opens a whole new market and industry in the accessories catalog, where it's like you may see companies kind of come out of the woodwork and start making these accessories or making these things for just exclusively the Humane AI Pin, skins, cases, just other complementary things that a user would need. That's extremely exciting. So the next part of this video is to really talk about my experience with the Humane AI Pin. I can't remember any other company, even my own company, at times where I remember and I can recite the organization's values. I've worked at companies, I've worked with companies, yeah, even from my own company. Sometimes I have a hard time reciting what are our values. But when it came to Humane, their core values are trust, truth, and joy. And it's just so simple and it's easy to understand. It's not like this level of pretentiousness, and it's not, it's not like your other cliches of like integrity, respect, and all those things, which, I mean, those are good values too, but trust, truth, and joy, it's just, it just really communicates their values in a really meaningful way. And, as I went through experiencing their product and their company from a customer's perspective, I started really making these mental score cards in my head based on those values. So effectively, I made like a mental spreadsheet where trust, truth, and joy are the columns, and for every interactions I had with them and understanding their communications and marketing, I either add a point or subtract a point, deduct a point from those core values. And I mean, when it comes to the design, from my own personal experience, it's absolutely phenomenal. I've already said this, but it's built like a tank too. It just feels really firm in your hand. The most enjoyable unboxing experience I've ever had with any product. I just remember vividly just having a huge smile on my face when I put it on and like looked at the laser display for the first time. So that right there was positive points for me on the truth and the joy and the trust aspect of it. Like, it delivered finally, and I felt nothing but joy working, like just interacting with the product the first time. Now let's talk about the onboarding. This was extremely painful, incredibly painful. Truthfully, there was a point during that onboarding period where I was like, if this pin doesn't arrive by the end of the month or the end of May, I might just cancel my order. I was on the Discord and just following all these communications. I reached out to support and I got all these back and forth emails, and it was just it was not a joyful experience. I began to lose trust in the company, and then I also questioned the truth, like, where was I misled the whole time? But I will say that the support, I mean, they did confirm that I was on the priority list, and there was a time there where they were announcing, hey, all the onboarding emails are going to be sent out in batches. Well, the last batch was sent. I never received the email to be onboarded. So I reached out to support, and support confirmed that I was on the priority list. So they sent me the onboarding link. I signed on, and I didn't have any functionality to just onboard. The only functionality I had was mark as a gift. It was like a button for my PIN. And I went back and forth with support again for several days, and they effectively said like, hey, this is like a technical engineering problem on their end. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So effectively, I was unable to onboard with my original email account. My original account with my original email. So they gave me the instructions to, hey, how about you just create a new account under a whole different email. I went through the onboarding process with the link again, and I was successfully then able to onboard. But I'm still waiting on my clip accessory at this moment. But I was expecting my PIN to arrive like April 11th, but I received it 13 days later on April 24th. And I think had I not reached out to support and just kind of put my hands up, I probably would not have my PIN right now. And again, the scorecard right there, that really deducted a lot of points for me on all those values there. But at the end of the day, they delivered and they were able to work. And I think those are moments where I can empathize with a small team like that, a relatively small team like that. And yeah, it was just, the onboarding was definitely painful. Privacy and ownership of data. So Humane's terms on the ownership of data it's a little borderline problematic in some ways. I mean, it doesn't really align with what they're saying. So like in podcast interviews, I think I've heard them say like, hey, the data is the users. They don't look at the data. They don't look at your AI pin and see what you've said to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They said that they would never sell your data and all this stuff. But the terms of actually onboarding and getting your device set up and all this stuff, it just communicates a different impression, honestly. Because I mean, effectively, and I'm simplifying this, but the terms effectively say that the user's data is owned by Humane, royalty-free, and can be licensed, aka sold, and done so with as they please. I'm not a fan of this, honestly, but I need to kind of take one step back and look at all the other tech that I use in my life when it comes to software, all these user agreements that you have to accept to even sign in or create an account. And just think about in your life too, like anything. Like it could be DoorDash, it could be Uber, it could be, signing for a freaking newsletter of some dog grooming company in your neighborhood. There's always these terms and fine prints that something tells me that maybe this is just the reality we live in and this is the current state, right? That this is probably the standard. However, I do not think it's right, because I've always said this. It's like, sell my data all you want. Seriously, sell my data all you want, but just give me a percentage of the sale. I just want to cut. It's my information after all, right? It's my name, it's my address, it's my phone. It's information that is unique to me that only I possess. Like, sell it all you want, but just give me a cut. I own the data, right? I don't know. But overall, this point definitely just the whole data and privacy thing. I deduct some points off the trust and truth scorecard, my mental scorecard. As far as AI, I'm very familiar with AI. I've been using it for quite some time now. But I think for the AI piece, after all, it is called the Humane AI Pin. Let's dig a little deeper. So let's talk about accuracy. So the accuracy is off. I mean, it's not perfect, which is, I think, is inherent with most AI language models. But these are opportunities where I wish I could do something, use something like Grok. From my experience, I've found that Grok actually is the most accurate and has the most, like, the perfect amount of substance I need when it comes to language models. I've used ChatGPT, used Google, and etc. But I just wish, like Humane, I think right now they do utilize OpenAI as one of the language learning models, and then use Google Gemini for the vision. But they've developed their own AI bus, which is effectively like their own neural network on top of everything. But I wish like Grok is like another service that they have on the back end that they can pick from. And ideally, if I had it my way, I would just use Grok, honestly. The where of the AI pin itself, yeah, I'm just not a fan of wearing it on any t-shirts. I mean, I've tried it on multiple shirts with different types of cotton blends, like one's a little more stiffer, one's a little bit more breathable, but all it does is just like drag my shirts down. I hate that look of a slouch collar. So, you know, I actually kind of have one right now, but that's because I'm wearing a Rode mic that has also a magnet on it. So that's probably why, but that's just another one of my feedbacks on the wear of it. The perception of the AI pin is interesting as well, where people are intrigued by the device when I walk around. And, you know, the common question that I've heard is, or people have asked me, is like, hey, is that recording? But I think it's a funny that that's the question, because if I was to wear my phone in a pocket tee with the camera facing out, people would probably just don't even bat an eye with it, right? That's the one thing, again, which I love about the design of the AI pin, is that it gives you that visual indicator that it is recording. And it really makes us, as you know, consumers, rethink of how we, go to meetings or go into public and everyone always has their phone out. It really makes us kind of rethink, like, we've just been so like normalized to know that perhaps someone is recording, or those devices that we trust the individual that they're not recording, but you just don't know. You don't know. The services. I'm not a fan of Tidal. I'm sorry. I'm just not a fan of Tidal. Honestly, like literally anything but Tidal would be awesome. Now, there was a point in my life, like recently actually, where I wanted to get back into DJing and stuff, and Tidal has great products for that. But honestly, right now, it's like I usually use YouTube Music. Spotify is also a great option. But I do appreciate the transparency, and they do disclose like what services they are using on the back end. But yeah, and it's not just some random obscure tech company out of Silicon Valley at some co-working space, right? So I can appreciate that they're picking services that are reputable, and that kind of has some built-in trust there. Now the AI voice, just for the love of God, like, just please allow people to pick a different voice. Like, her voice is all right, but I'm just not a fan. Like, ChatGPT has pretty much mastered their options for voice. I can pull up the voice feature for ChatGPT and I pick different voices, and the responses are becoming even more nuanced, where you can hear the voice, the AI voice, like breathe. You can hear the AI voice say ums and ahs. It just makes it a little bit more natural. And if the Humane AI Pin can adopt that with 11 Labs or whatever AI model it is that's kind of leading that space, that would just be a great, great, great additional feature. It would make me actually want to use the AI Pin a little bit more, because after all, it is generally a voice product, a voice command product. So I don't know. Those are kind of like really the highlights of my Humane AI Pin review. I've really there's just so much more to talk about. And truthfully, I just had all my notes up here written, and what I would like to do is kind of go back and release this as an article, but actually have some references and citations, and just having more clarity on kind of like the quantitative things that I was speaking about in this video. But overall, I'm extremely happy to have the AI Pin. It's another tool in the tool chest, and I think it's just how I can sometimes just be away from screens, like when I'm driving and so forth like that, or I'm just walking around the house or out and about, or even watching shows or movies. It's just such a nice way to just ask a question and just get a response, right? And I understand that the latency and other certain things, it will be improved over time, and I'm along for the ride. But so far, it's been great, honestly. Like, it's really not that bad as people make it out to seem. And for early adopters, if you're much like myself, like, I think you understand that. And I think there's just so much noise right now talking about just all these ridiculous things that I guess if you're a mainstream audience and you don't, you're a laggard, much like you would never buy an electric vehicle. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not saying those people's perceptions are wrong, but it's just like, let's just be more specific about who we're talking to. So I think that right there was an opportunity for me to kind of speak up a little bit more for this review or this kind of analysis of the Humane AI Pin. What time is it?
9:35 p.m.
What day is it?
It is Monday, May 6th, 2024.
I have mine set to Vietnamese because I am Vietnamese and my family's Vietnamese. I've yet to try it with my mom or my dad, but so far it's been all right. Let's see how it works right now. Hôm nay là mấy giờ vậy?
What time is it today?
Okay, good. What day is it today?
Hôm nay là ngày gì?
Yeah, it's pretty good, honestly. It can just really answers and address the translation model is pretty good, honestly. I mean, I think there were some things that it didn't really make much sense, but that could also be with my broken Vietnamese. So I imagine if I'm in Vietnam, I can actually make it in use in some ways. But the camera feature is also kind of neat. I mean, the quality is all right, but let's see if I can take a photo. Yep, so it takes 3 photos, and I think on the back end it stitches it together, and it's kind of like a wide, like panoramic type photo. And then when it comes to video, it records a 15-second long video with audio, and you can all access it on the Humane Center or humane.center, which I think is also a nice feature. I didn't talk about that at all in this video, but I think for the most part, it gets the job done. And I don't know, again, I'm not a software guy, but for my uses, it does it pretty good. I mean, it keeps lists, it keeps to-do lists for me and whatnot, or they call it memories or notes. So yeah, I think it does have a lot of capabilities that the phone has right now. But at this rate, I'm not necessarily looking for this pin to completely replace my phone. If anything, it's just instead of pulling on my phone, I can just go to the pin and just address it there and try to get that feature at that time without pulling out my phone. Really, if I can get information without looking at a screen, that's the world I want to live in. Period. Full stop.